Our nation needs healing. 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. President Biden, in his inauguration speech, said that it is time to heal our souls. What do we mean by soul? The spiritual or immaterial part of a human being regarded as immortal. It is also emotional, intellectual energy, or intensity. Soul can also mean an individual human being or essence of a human being. If you believe the soul is immortal, you believe that when your physical body dies, some other part of you lives on. Our nation and our world need healing. In President Biden's inauguration speech, he stated that democracy is fragile. At this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. Democracy is indeed fragile. We had violence on the Capitol grounds 2 weeks previous to the inauguration, and now we had a peaceful transfer of power on Inauguration Day. Our nation is strong. We have had other issues in the past where we united. The attack on 9/11 was a uniting event. We may squabble about things that don't matter in the long run, but when someone attacks our nation, we come together. Do not mistake unity as agreement. Unity does not mean we agree on everything. As a Congregationalist, UCC states, in essentials, unity, in non-essentials, diversity, in all things, charity. The right to dissent peaceably, the guardrails of our republic, is perhaps this nation's greatest strength, Biden said. What defines us as Americans? Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and the truth. Also words said by President Biden at his inauguration. We need to defend the truth and defeat the lies. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts. That is the mission at Healing with the Rev, to heal souls. Many of us are outraged because we have not dealt with our own issues and trauma. Our nation has been traumatized in the past several years, and 2020 was an unprecedented year of George Floyd being killed by a police officer, Black Lives Matter movement, COVID-19 global pandemic. These are all traumatic events that we have not dealt with at the soul level. Many of you have been traumatized in the past, but have not dealt with that. And so this is just compounding any unresolved trauma that you are experiencing at this time. President Biden also said, there's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days you need a hand, and other days we're called to lend a hand. That's how it was meant to be. That's what we do for one another. We have seen neighbors reaching out to neighbors during this pandemic time. If we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future, and we can agree to disagree. Trump was not a part of this inauguration at his choice. He broke from a major traditional ceremony of transfer of power. It feels like there was no closure, and so we are re-traumatized because of that long-standing tradition. Peaceful transfer of power from the outgoing president to the incoming president. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. We are the United States, not the untied states. The Message Bible says, the nights of crying your eyes out give way to days of laughter. The laughter will show up. It's just not right now. Biden said, this is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far. But we still have far to go. We will press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities, much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. We have much to mend, just like when a piece of clothing gets mending. You need thread and cloth. Our mending comes through taking time to process what happened and to bring healing to your soul. White supremacy, violence, domestic terrorism needs to stop now. We will defeat the enemy. We need to restore the soul of each and every one of us. We need soul healing. We must be united on all fronts. 2 Corinthians 10, 3-5, the New International Version states, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." 1 Peter 5, 8, and 9, New International Version again. "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings." Biden continues, "On this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment, hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. We need to unite to bring pleasure, kindness, love, calmness, moderation, health, tolerance, cohesiveness, jobs, and hope." 1 Peter 4, 8 and 10, 8 through 10, NIV says, "Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." This is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the setting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these will be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up? All of us? It's time for boldness, for there is so much to do. And this is certain, I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises in our era, Biden says. Deuteronomy 4, 29 and 30, New International Version. "But if from there you seek the Lord your God, you will find him if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. When you are in distress and all these things have happened to you, then in later days you will return to the Lord your God and obey him. And together we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch, but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generations to follow. Sustained by faith, driven by conviction, devoted to one another and the country we love with our whole hearts, let us come together and start your healing process." Again, words of President Biden. On November 7, 2020, our newly elected President Biden said this in his victory speech: "Let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, to lower the temperature, to see each other again, to listen to each other again. To make progress, we must stop treating our opponents as our enemy. We are not enemies. We are Americans. The Bible tells us that to everything there is a season, a time to build, a time to reap, a time to sow, and a time to heal. This is the time to heal in America. Our recent event of storming the Capitol of the United States is unprecedented. Most of us did not know this was going to happen. Those who love excitement and need to express themselves took massive action to make sure they were heard. 2020 has been a year of massive change. In January, we had heard of a contagious strain that was in China. Someone contracted the virus in Wuhan, China, and brought it back to the United States. And by March, the United States was in lockdown. We didn't know what to think about this strain and how it was going to affect people. So we have lived in isolation, away from our family and friends. Extroverted people are having an especially hard time, while the introverts are saying that they have been ready for this for years. We have seen loved ones die and not being able to say final goodbyes. As a pastor, I have seen people who live with regret about things that should have been said but were not said. Parents and their children who have had issues in the past and were never resolved. This happens more often than we like to think, but this year has been especially hard. Loved ones that are in nursing homes, living out the rest of their lives in a congregated setting. The children of these loved ones cannot go in for fear of giving the workers or the residents the COVID-19 virus. We have become very creative in how we see our family in person, from one side of the door to another, seeing but not touching. Our Zoom conferencing has become a mainstay for many people around the world. We are seeing people, but we are lacking physical touch. When we meet someone for the first time in person, we in America want to stretch out our hand and shake theirs. It's a sign of greeting, and that is physical touch that we have stripped away. This has been a year that has tested us and our mettle. How long and how far can we go on like this? How much more time do we need to live in isolation? If COVID-19 does not kill us, it will be the isolation, loneliness, depression, and anxiety that will. 2020 was also an empowering year. Black Lives Matter. From the death of Breonna Taylor to George Floyd dying by the foot of a policeman, choking George's airways. We have seen an uprising in justice for all people of color, as it should be. From Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King to the riots of today. This should not have happened. We are smarter and wiser than the 1960s when the Civil Rights Movement took place. According to History.com, on the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement was a struggle for social justice that took place mainly during the 1950s and 1960s for Black Americans to gain equal rights under the law in the United States. The Civil War had officially abolished slavery, but it didn't end discrimination against Black people. They continued to endure the devastating effects of racism, especially in the South. By the mid-20th century, Black Americans had had more than enough of prejudice and violence against them. They, along with many white Americans, mobilized and began an unprecedented fight for equality that spanned 2 decades. We all need healing. Healing happens on many levels. Healing from sickness, healing emotionally, healing psychologically, healing mentally, healing spiritually, and many more ways of healing. It is time for our land to heal. There is so much forgiveness that needs to take place. When holding on to anger, you only do yourself damage. A diagnosis of cancer because something is eating at you. When you get rid of the thing that is eating at you inside, then you can heal your body also. The United States of America is the world powerhouse. Every other country looks at us. The United States was brought into existence as an experiment in democracy. What we have seen with storming the Capitol on January 6, 2021 was not a healing way for us to deal with the problems of democracy. What the Congress was doing that day was counting the votes and verifying the vote count. The votes and counting were completed. The Congress was doing their administrative duties. Our allies are sad to see this happen, while our enemies are happy that the U.S. is divided against itself. We should not be surprised if our enemies find our weakness and exploit it and attack us, just like September 11, 2001. The word united, if typed incorrectly, can show up as untied. Sometimes we act as if we are untied. We feel that this country is unraveling. Even though 2020 was a very trying year, it did allow us to see some good things happen. Because we were in lockdown, less people were driving their cars and air pollution lessened to really see the beauty around them and to hear the birds. If we live in a city with many cars and buses going by, we tend to forget about nature and all of her wonderful qualities. It is time to connect back to our nature, who we really are. Ask yourself who you really are. People are finding their voice like never before. With the protests of the killing of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, we are realizing that it is not just the Black population that was protesting this police violence. It was people with many different colors, including many whites. We don't have to believe every thought we think. We can choose to think differently. I said, think differently. There are many action-oriented people that are tired of status quo, and they need excitement. Have your excitement without inciting violence. Use that action in a positive way, and you will make massive progress in your life. We tend to be fearful of the things we do not understand. Listen, read, listen some more. Listen to that still small voice within. That is God speaking. Many of us forget to listen. We pray to God and ask, but how many of us really listen to what our subconscious intuition, Holy Spirit, whatever term fits you, they're all the same, is telling you? Matthew 7:7-8 says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. We don't receive because we don't ask. We don't find because we don't seek. The door doesn't open because you have not knocked. Ask for what you want. I'm scared, you may say. Of what? Being rejected? You're already rejected because you haven't knocked on the door. What is it that you want? You don't know what you want? Then you cannot receive because you don't know what to ask for. You're going to have to reach deep into your soul. If you don't know how to do that or access it, you come see me at healingwiththerev.com. Many schools are still distance learning. Our children need to go back to school full time. School is about more than just learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's about socializing, learning how to communicate, working as a team, playing team sports, playing a musical instrument, or artistic endeavors like dancing and acting. It gives them a place to be supported in all of their extracurricular activities, and the parents know where their children are after school. Our virus has many people working from home. If they have school-age children, then they are homeschooling parent. The parent did not sign up to be a homeschooler and for teaching their children at home. They want their children in school. Some people who are working from home really enjoy the freedom that gives them. There is more productivity because you aren't spending hours on the road driving to and from work. In high population areas, it takes longer to get to work when working from a building, and much time is spent on the road driving to and from work. We have cut that stress level down a lot in those areas due to the excessive drive time that is non-existent. Companies are rethinking how they do business because of the virus. There are many Fortune 500 companies that have been closing their doors and will continue to do so. Other businesses have not survived, like the mom and pop stores and businesses. Some families have lost their life savings and their business all in one fell swoop. These small business owners are resilient and will move forward once again. Unfortunately, there are some families that are not faring well because of abuse. There are women who are being abused. And now that everyone is staying home, it is getting worse. There's no place for abused women to go to when everyone is under the directive to stay home and stay in lockdown. Many of us knew absolutely nothing about the virus and what it would do. Even the doctors. The doctors at the beginning of this were starting to write their wills, such as emergency room doctors. They are working to save your life while putting their life in jeopardy. This is where the scripture John 15:13 comes in. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. That's why there is a mask mandate to protect all, especially our frontline workers in the healthcare system. They want you to be well so they can work on those who truly need the care. No doctor wants to see a patient who doesn't need to be there. Many of our health problems originate not in the physical realm, but the spiritual one. When you can't get a diagnosis and you have been to many doctors and specialists and they can't find anything wrong, you need a spiritual healer. Healing with the Rev will assist you in your spiritual healing. U.S. infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci in July said, "We haven't even begun to see the end of it yet. More than 1 million are dead." That was July. It is now several months later. Let's face it, our population is aging. As people get older, organs break down. Just like fixing a car and getting repairs, so do we have to get our body fixed and get repairs through surgery, pharmaceutical drugs, or doctor visits. There is an increasing number of people facing food insecurity month after month. Because of the global pandemic and some people being out of work, many cannot afford to buy food for the family. When we look at the elderly population who are not financially secure, we see them making a choice of whether to buy food or buy their medicines to keep them alive. In 2021, we are still hearing to mask up, stay home as much as possible, and keep your children home from school and safe. We have had a lot of solidarity as well as division in this past several years. We are united in getting this vaccine under control. We are now doing our part by separating ourselves from loved ones. We have celebrated holidays alone or with a few close people. We have been tested in many ways. Have we passed the test? People have taken to the streets because of injustice. The killing of George Floyd to the election results, we have seen many people respond because of their viewpoint of injustice. We need to take a step back and think about how to positively move forward without guns, fighting, and being able to calm our temperaments and sit down and discuss civilly. All most people want is to be heard. In order to be heard, we do not have to yell, scream, or fight. We need to go to the source of our discontent and work it out. We have all felt emotions that have never been felt or talked about before. We are getting better at putting names to how we feel. We are charged differently because of all that has happened in 2020. White women celebrated the 100th anniversary of getting the right to vote. Not all were allowed to vote at that time. It also marked the first woman to win the vice presidency, Kamala Harris, who was a Black and Asian woman. Millennials and younger generations make up 50.7% of the population. Born after 1981, these young people are fighting for change. Many of these young people took to the streets after George Floyd got killed by a white policeman. Young women are reclaiming their power not only in the United States, but also in New Zealand and other parts of the world. The millennials will be our next generation of leaders, if they are not already. In listening to Minnesota Public Radio on January 19th, the show 1A was on, and they were talking to young people aged 22 and younger and asking them to call in. Towards the end of the show, they talked with a 12-year-old young man who told them that he had written a paper on unity. He shared some phrases that he wrote in that paper. If a 12-year-old is telling us it is time to unite, it is time to unite. That young man shows more wisdom than many adults. The wisdom of the young generation is incredible. These young people who spoke were well-spoken, and they knew why they thought what they thought. That is what the educational process is supposed to do. It is not to tell us what to think, but teach us how to think. 2020 is also the year that hope endured. Global noise pollution dropped by half. Due to COVID-19 virus, our air pollution and water quality improved in cities around the world. People are discovering what their city looks like without the smog and fog. The ecosystem is improving. Knowing your children and other family members better is a blessing in disguise. Many people have spent only a few days in the office since March 2020 when the global pandemic hit the United States, and we realized how deadly this virus was or could be. How do we heal from all the trauma we are experiencing? We ask forgiveness from our God. We all know that not everyone believes the same thing. We all worship the same God, but call God by different names. Call upon your God to ask forgiveness. You don't need a priest to absolve you from sin and separation. You can talk to God just as well as the priest. Realize we are separated from God. When we do horrible things, then we are separated from God. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, declares the Lord, Jeremiah 1:5. If God knew us before we were born in his image, then we must be divine beings because God is divine and we came from God. There is no separation from God. We are all the same and we are all connected. When we realize that we are all one, then we will treat each other differently. Your neighbor is not just the person who lives close to you in proximity. Your neighbor is on the other side of the world. They may have more melanin in their skin than people who are white do, but we all came from Source, God. Realize that healing is not instantaneously with these deep issues. Healing takes time. You can get the tools, but the healing truly begins and ends with you. We have grief to walk through. The 5 stages of grief are denial. We deny that there is a problem. We have seen this for a very long time in our country and our world. Anger. We have been seeing this through the presidential election and the storming of the Capitol. We have seen an uprising. We need to move forward. Bargaining. We all want to bargain with God. If I do this, then I want this to happen. Depression. We are feeling depression over the recent events, and we feel bad. With the storming of the Capitol, 5 people died. The storming should not have happened, and then these 5 people would still be alive today. Acceptance. We are accepting that Trump has left and President Biden is now our president. Give President Biden a chance. You may have lost your favorite president, but we must accept the fact that we need to let justice do its job. In conclusion, let's end where we started with in the scripture, 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Our nation needs healing on so many levels. Our emotions, our psyche, our physical, our spiritual aspects all need healing. Our newly elected President Biden is going to assist us in healing. In the God Experiments book by Gary Schwartz, Soul as Information, Spirit as Energy, Manifesting the Evolving Fields of Wisdom and Love, is this poem. What, pray tell, are spirit and soul? Are they one and the same? Are soul and spirit a functional whole, derived from a common name? Or is the case that soul and spirit reflect 2 sides of a coin, where soul expresses the information that fits, and spirit the energy that joins? Is soul the story, the plan of life, the music we play, our score? Is spirit the passion, the fire of life, our motive to learn, to soar? Soul directs the paths we take, the guidance that structures our flow. Spirit feels very alive, awake, the force that moves us to grow. If soul is plan and spirit is flame, then fields are alive, you see. Nature may play a majestic game of information and energy. I'd love to believe that wisdom and joy reflects God's plans and dreams, that soul and spirit are more than toys, and both are more than they seem. Could it be that the soul of God is the wisest of plans so grand, And the Spirit of God is the lightning rod that inspires God's loving hand. Could soul be wisdom and spirit be love together, a divine partnership, purpose and passion, a duet from above, the ultimate relationship? The relationship of spirit to soul, so simple, profound, this team. For spirit and soul, the ultimate goal, to understand the scheme. Soul as wisdom, spirit as love, information and energy, awakened compassion, the flight of the dove. Someday, pray tell, we'll see. In order to continue this process, you may order your healing session today at www.healingwiththerev.com. May God bless America, and more importantly, may America bless God.